It is without question that music is a cultural hallmark of advanced societies. From the ancient Brahmins imitating birdsong in the Indian jungles to rudimentary animal skin drums, music has been one of humanity's favorite methods of emotional expression. In this presentation, we are going to briefly examine the role music played in ancient civilizations and briefly examine the instruments they developed to create it. Singing is a trait that predates language. The early vocalizations of humans were likely mimicry of sounds heard in nature, such as chirping birds, cooing babies, animal noises, and any other sounds heard on the plains or in the forests and jungles. Over time, these vocalizations served such purposes as communicating over distance, warning of danger, luring animals for hunting, and most importantly, to articulate and pass down ideas. Early human tribes likely passed information to the next generation in the form of rudimentary songs. These vocalizations demonstrated melody and tonality. Another aspect of music would develop: rhythm. Rhythm can be defined as movement marked by the regulated succession of strong and weak elements, or of opposite or different conditions. Early rhythms were performed by clapping hands, or on drums fashioned out of hollowed-out logs and struck with the hands, stones, or sticks. Eventually, animal skins would be stretched across the drum to create a timbre, which could be adjusted by changing the tautness of the skin. Along with providing the beat for ritual ceremonies or celebrations, different rhythms could signal different ideas, and this would be useful for communication over distance as well. As civilizations advanced, mankind's enterprising nature would allow for the creation of different types of instruments. According to Bruno Netti, the existence of stone tools alone allows the development of bone flutes and musical bows. The invention of pottery adds kettle drums and clay percussion instruments, and the development of metalwork makes possible the construction of brass gongs. Also devised would be a system of written notation to immortalize the melodies, rhythms, and songs that would be created. Some of the earliest musical instruments found date back to Mesopotamia, about 3000 BC. Harps were found, as were cuneiform tablets demonstrating knowledge of early music theory and notation. Other primary sources include sculpture and paintings from early cultures. Let's start by taking a look at the Egyptian civilization. Music in ancient Egypt was mostly used in temple worship and enjoyed by the political and religious elite. Musicians were held in high esteem, although for an amateur, it is unlikely that musical achievement was seen as a desirable goal for individuals who were not professionals. Unfortunately, early Egyptian music was not notated and most has been lost. Instruments of the time included hand drums, rattles, bells, flutes, harps, lutes, and lyres. In contrast, music in early Greece was not only very popular, it was also heavily entwined with Greek mythology, with the likes of Orpheus, Amphion, and Hermes, just to name a few. Most Greek men were trained to sing, dance, and play an instrument. Greek philosophers saw a relationship between music and mathematics, envisioning music as a paradigm of harmonious order reflecting the cosmos and the human soul. Their most popular instruments were the kithara and lyre, and the aulos, which is a flute-like double reed instrument. There were also flutes, pan flutes, various horns, and the hydraulic organ. This hydraulic organ, or hydraulos, is a very creative invention. It is the first form of pipe organ, and it operated by using flowing water to create compressed air and pipes that could then be directed to the sound pipes to produce tones. The water would have to be flowing from a source, which would usually be a tank above the instrument. Running water could even be channeled from nearby streams. The Romans did not have a distinct musical footprint. They borrowed heavily from the cultures and people that they incorporated into their empire. Although important to the state, music was not valued as highly in terms of curriculum as was the case in Greece. Music was used in religious worship, military ceremonies, for theater, and for civic events. According to a text from Georgia Regents University, in the Roman Republic, music was not so highly esteemed. Music was not considered part of the essential education of the elites, and amateur performance of music was not encouraged. Professional musicians were held in low regard because music was used primarily as entertainment, not as an art form. Apparently, the Romans were too busy serving the empire to focus on music. However, with different cultural influences pouring in, that would eventually change, and musicians would get the esteem they so deserved. The instrument used in early Rome were largely the same as mentioned earlier for the Greeks. Traveling east, we can look to India. Very little is known about music in the Indus Valley civilization. A bow-shaped harp and several varieties of drums have been identified from the small terracotta figures that were likely found at excavation sites and seen in detailed cave paintings. Sadly, not much more is known. Music would, however, play an enormous role in the religion of the early Vedic civilization, so much so that dancing, singing, and playing instruments were viewed as divine activities. Time prohibits a thorough examination of its important cultural role, but we must mention the Rig Veda, which originates somewhere between 1500 to 500 BC. The Rig Veda is a compilation of poetic hymns and chants composed by Vedic priests to revere the elements of nature personified as deities. These prayers and chants for physical, material, and spiritual prosperity were passed down orally through generations. This poetry is a great look at early Indian culture, as it was considered divinely inspired and remains largely unchanged in over 3,000 years. Instruments from the Vedic period include the bow-shaped stringed veena with its many variations, drums such as the dundubi, the budundubi, and talav, flutes and horns like the venu and tanav, and even conch shells. If we travel a little farther east, we come to the Asian continent. Evidence exists to show that there was a large musical culture burgeoning in China in the Zhou dynasty. The importance of music varied throughout Chinese history, with some philosophers considering it refining and uplifting, while others considered it a purposeless indulgence. As in past examples, ceremonial music was very important to the state. In early times, musicians were considered lower in class than laborers. The Chinese developed a multitude of musical instruments, which I won't attempt to pronounce, but they consisted of a large variation of stringed instruments, wind instruments, zithers, and an assortment of percussion instruments. Music in some form has been with human beings about as long as we have been walking on the earth. It is an important aspect of who we are and has tremendous cultural, spiritual, and emotional value. Music can soothe the soul or inspire revolutions. We owe our ancient ancestors a great deal of gratitude for their creativity, passion, and skill in their contributions to the human experience.